Welcome into another episode of Everything is Logistics, a podcast for the thinkers in freight. We are proudly presented by SPI Logistics, and I am your host, Blythe Brumleve. And we got a hell of a show for you today because we are going to cover a lot of ground. Guest today, Matthew Leffler from Armchair Attorney, also famous content creator in the freight space. We're going to get into a lot of legal issues going on within the industry, and then we're going to get into a little bit of the power of content creation and maybe some Lord of the Rings talk a little bit later on in the show. No Rings of Power. This is a safe space from that abomination of a show, which I'm still recovering from, the PTSD from it. But yeah, we'll get into it later. Let's set the scene for today's show because there's so much drama going on in freight. When you have TQL getting sued, you have Convoy shutting down abruptly, you have Slink.io. I don't know what the hell's going on with that situation. So this is why I wanted to have you on so you could help us break down these complex industry things that are going on, and then how we can sort of see the pathway out. So first, I guess, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Blythe. It is always a pleasure to be able to talk with you, break down topics, find understanding, find that place of compromise where we can both agree that we need more people to be fans of Lord of the Rings, even if all of the material that comes out isn't perfect. We don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the good. And even if it's not good, it could be better. And we want people to be encouraged that they should watch everything Lord of the Rings. It's very important.
Well, hopefully my little increasing your volume there just didn't mess up as far as like computer notifications. So if you heard that, I'm sorry. I apologize that he was in the middle of a speech, but maybe I can remember that for later on in the show. If you start complimenting Rings of Power, I can just adjust the volume.
Just mute me? Is that the idea? I'm glad you have the power. This is what I always worried about. When you had all the power, would it corrupt you? And apparently, like the One Ring,
it absolutely would. It absolutely would.
No one can put it down. No one can give it up voluntarily. I understand. Well, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, well, thank you for coming on the show, especially with such short notice. Like I said, there's just so many industry news topics that are. It feels like one after another. You can't really catch a break. It's almost similar to very much to like world news of all the worldwide drama that's going on, and then we have freight that has its own little, just not little, but a lot of industry drama. So what I was kind of hoping for is that we have a few different situations, especially around the freight brokerage space. So kind of wanted to talk about, what's going on with 3PLs right now? What's going on with freight tech? How do we move forward? So let's first start with the TQL situation.
Yeah.
Now, TQL is one of those brokerages that is made fun of a lot, especially in the meme space. But they are one of the top dogs, if not the top brokerage in the entire industry. So what's going on with them, and how should industry professionals, I guess, learn from this?
Yeah, so I have my TQL pen here. I got this from a dear friend of mine, Charlie Safro. I love TQL. Let's set the stage. So a lot of stuff we're going to talk about is really market driven, right? About like how the market and the freight recession has been going on, and it'll continue for a period of time. This story for TQL has nothing to do with the market. This has to do with incredibly bad leadership that is going to result in a massive amount of liability. So let's set the stage. TQL is the second largest freight broker in the United States. They do about $8 billion a year in revenue. That's billion with a B. This is a big business. And they have been brokering freight for over 20 years. Leader of this company, Ken Oaks. We're going to talk about Ken quite a bit. This case is really interesting. So here's the story. TQL has this program, and the program is for junior freight brokers. They call them, in the lawsuit, LAETs, the Logistics Account Executive Trainees. And once you pass this trainee period, you get to be something, another name they call a Logistics Account Executive, but they call them a Junior Logistics Account Executive. This is what it's all about. Are you exempt or are you not exempt from overtime? This is the fundamental question that has been answered and asked over and over again in every single industry. TQL took the position that if you are a logistics account executive trainee or a junior logistics account executive, you don't get overtime. And what we find is those folks, those men and women who go into the business of brokering freight, have about, at the minimum, 26 weeks of being a logistics account executive trainee, something like that, half a year. And they're working 60 hours a week. 60 hours a week, they're doing phone calls, track and trace, cold calling, all of the things that junior freight brokers do. So in 2010, TQL gets sued. And they get sued under this thing called the Fair Labor Standards Act. Essentially, the statute that says, like, who's exempt and who's not exempt. Lawyers, we're exempt. Like, I don't get overtime. I can sit in a windowless office for 16 hours a day, and it's always the same amount of money. Like, I don't get more for working more. But in other spaces, you do get overtime. And this was the fundamental fight, Blythe, is whether or not these junior executives or junior brokers deserve or are required to be paid overtime. And this litigation started in 2010. It went to trial in 2022. The verdict came out in September 26, 2023. This is 13 years of litigation.
Why did it take so long?
This is what we call bet the farm litigation, which is to say this is the most challenging and difficult litigation you're ever going to experience as a business. If you lose, you can lose your business. So you fight tooth and nail about who the plaintiffs are, how you look at a class action suit. And so in this case, it's 4,500 brokers, all in the state of Ohio from 2008 to 2016. That is the class of people that are suing. And it went to trial, and TQL lost.
Okay, all right. 4,000 TQL. First of all, I have a bunch of questions.
Oh,
first of all,
love this. I love it.
Okay, so TQL had 4,000 brokers that were affected by this in just the state of Ohio?
Yeah, so the way to look at this is TQL admits in depositions and in the discovery, 95% of people who go into their program leave. They burn out. They go. So this is a meat grinder. This is an old school, bring them in, break them over the wheel, throw them away, and the cream will rise to the top and you move on. That is why you see me all the time talk about non-competition agreements, because that 95% that fail out all have a non-compete. They can't go back in this business. So that's one of those little kind of caveats to remember about this stuff.
Oh, so that makes a lot more sense now while there's so many folks in Ohio that are making this or making this judgment or participating in this judgment. Now my next question is, how does TQL get to determine who is exempt and non-exempt from overtime?
That's a great question. So that is the fundamental inquiry for this lawsuit: is who told you to make them exempt or non-exempt? What was the reasoning behind this? And it's revealed in the deposition of Ken Oakes that he got that advice from the Transportation Intermediaries Association. He went to TIA and said, "Hey, I have these people. What should I do with them?" And they said, well, the other participants in the space call them exempt. We call them exempt so they don't get overtime. So those 60 hours a week, weekends, nights, holidays, whatever, they're not going to get overtime. That decision was, again, made by TIA or recommended by TIA, and Ken Oakes followed it. He didn't go to his outside counsel, didn't go to his internal counsel, just said, I'll take that advice.
That's so strange. Go ahead.
This is where I get this is the part that makes it so interesting. So these people that were working this job, average salary was about, let's say, $36,000 a year. So if you're working that, you're probably making like $17 an hour, something in that range. If you're making overtime, your rate is time and a half, like $24 an hour. The liability in front of TQL right now for this one case in Ohio, on the most conservative estimate, is $100 million.
Wow.
On the high end, it's like $200 million. Now, why it's important to know these numbers, and we'll talk a lot about it because it's amazing, but these are numbers that are uninsurable through your general liability policy. This is paid out of your operating capital. Like, you have to take money from your bank and hand it to the lawyers and say, here is your money. And TQL lost. They tried to make the argument that these freight brokers were administrative personnel, kind of like your HR department or your marketing department or your whatever, payroll department, which can be considered exempt in certain manager positions. But for these brokers, they were doing clerical work. They were all clerks. They've called them whatever you want to call them, but they were just doing clerical stuff. And because they were misclassified, and we look at these average amounts of 20 hours of overtime per person per week, and you take the 4,500 people, you can start doing those math, and you can start getting those numbers. So that is why this litigation is so interesting, because this is how our industry operates. It is a systematic issue of how you classify a trainee. Once they start getting commission, you're done. You don't have to worry about it anymore. But if they're just getting straight salary draw with no other, commission or variable component, they're likely going to be considered exempt. Considered non-exempt, which means they must get overtime. Exempt being they don't get overtime. It's fascinating.
I still have a bunch of questions about this one. Is it only exclusive to Ohio, or does this have a chance to spread out to all states?
This is a contagion. So it's only Ohio. This one here is only Ohio. So people keep asking me, like, Matt, can TQL handle a $200 million verdict? Of course they can. That's probably 1/4 of their operating capital, their earnings. So they're going to lose an entire quarter of profitability. If you have 4 or 5 cases like this, your knees start to buckle. You get 10 cases like this, you're out of business. I don't care how big you are, how smart you are. And so this has the absolute potential to spread any place where TQL is doing this program, and for any other freight broker who followed the guidance that was offered by TIA is also on the hook. Now, 2 really cool things about this case. Oh, good.
Where did those balloons come from?
So Apple has a thing. If you do this, like it'll make balloons. I don't know how this works.
Sorry, if you're just listening, he just had a bunch of balloons, go up in front of his face, and I didn't know if that was a software thing on my end, but
no, it's on my side, and I should know better.
Did you do
because
that
I
on
saw
purpose based on the topic you were talking about?
No, I move my hands. I talk with my hands.
I'm kidding.
Well, so the first thing that's really interesting is this thing called liquidated damages. Liquidated damages is only awarded in these cases if it's shown that you didn't act in good faith. So there's a question that's given to Ken Oaks and TQL. When you were asked, are these people exempt or non-exempt? How hard did you work to get the answer? Did you go to outside counsel? Did you go to local counsel? Did you go internal with your own company? Like, well, how hard did you work? And under deposition, under the penalty of perjury, Ken Oaks says, no, I just went to TIA. I just asked them. That's all I did.
Well, how normal is it to ask an association about hiring practices? You would think that if you've been in a brokerage business for at least 10 years, you have established hiring practices. So why in that moment did he feel as if he had to go to an outside association to ask a question that he probably already knew the answer to?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I don't think we know the answer. I think there's a combination of he knew TIA would likely give him the answer that he wanted to hear, because if you were to go into the Wayback Machine, you're going to add probably $10,000 to $20,000 in payroll expenses per person to do it the correct way. And that's really, if your operating margins aren't super great, you're not going to want to make that change. Number 2, a lot of these trade associations, and I love them, I really do, they make you think that they're indispensable. They make you think that they know everything about the law and compliance, and they don't. They're not fiduciaries. They're not out here saying, I'll put myself in your shoes and give you the best advice. This is what everyone's doing. Okay, that seems like what I want to do. So liquidated damages was essentially taking the total amount that TQL had to pay in back wages and doubling it. So that's how we get to the number from $45 million in back wages to potentially $90 million with the liquidated damages. And if it's higher, and I've heard inside people saying they think it's going to be closer to $200 million. That's why it's so imperative. Like, you have to do the job that you're hired to do. Now, the part that I really find interesting, if you're a corporate officer of one of these businesses and you're found to have violated the Fair Labor Standards Act, you are individually, personally, jointly, and severally liable for the entire amount. So if TQL can't pay that $200 million, and I can for this one, it's on the hook for Ken. And if you're a freight broker out there, and I can't emphasize enough how important this case is. If you're a freight broker out there and you follow this pattern and practice of how you classify your trainees, you are on the hook. You can be sued individually for everything that you have. I can pierce the corporate veil. I can get to your car. I can get to your bank account. I can get to your home. I can put a lien on your property and force a foreclosure. Like, I will get paid. And so people have to understand, like, when you make these shortcuts and making hiring decisions and classification distinctions, it's at your own risk. Because if you don't know the law, it doesn't matter We don't need you to know it. We just need you to know that we're coming for you.
You know what this kind of feels like when you're driving down the highway and you see all those billboards that are like, have you been in a truck accident? Call us and we'll get you the money you deserve. Is that kind of maybe what the future holds for freight brokerages?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I cannot emphasize enough the amount of people who have reached out to me, whether it's through Reddit or Twitter or LinkedIn, and said, hey, do you know anything about Florida or Ohio or Illinois or California, whatever? And these cases are going to come. They are going to come. And the other part that's important to note is, again, there's no insurance you can buy for this. Number two, you're personally liable for it. And number three, it also rewards attorney's fees. So if you win, if you're the plaintiff and you sue and you win, you, the employer, have to pay the lawyer's bills for your side and their side. So the liability is substantial. And TIA, they made a statement when this case came out, when Ken Oaks was deposed, and they said they didn't agree with the ruling, which is to say, like, they're not denying what they said. Like, they're not saying we didn't tell him that. They're saying we disagree with the interpretation. So I'm telling you, freight brokers, like, if you think TIA knows what they're talking about as it relates to this issue, I would be very skeptical. I would take a beat and make sure that you actually are doing it correctly. Now, this is the part, Blythe, that I get really excited about because it makes it really kick. So let's say you are doing it wrong and you want to do it right. You're going to go to your freight broker and say, hey, guys and gals, we're going to make you guys, we're going to pay you hourly. And they're going to say, well, that's weird. Why is that happening? And they're going to Google it. And they're going to see the case against TQL. And they'll see people like us talking about it because this case happened to Robinson. This case happened to Echo. And they lost those cases. But those cases got buried because no one talked about it.
Oh, wow.
This is why what we do is so important because young people don't know their rights. I have a bunch of pieces of paper on my wall that talk to me about how I know people's rights. So this is why this case is so interesting. It's really fun.
And it's crazy you say that because, just thinking of the model of freight brokers, I worked in one, started working in one more than 10 years ago. When I actually went out of business 10 years ago. So closer like 15 years ago is when I worked in one. And it was a constant effort for us to go to the college down the road, find, some people that were just fresh out of graduation and recruit them to come work for the freight brokerage, and you just make them hammer the phones.
That's right.
It sounds like that is, just a normal thing that happens across freight brokerages. Is it safe to say that hiring practice will still continue, but they need to just classify them correctly?
Yeah, I think that'll absolutely, because it'll happen. It's like we need in this business meat for the grinder. And the meat can be offshored labor, which has a lot less rights to deal with and a lot easier and cheaper to do with. A lot of brokers have moved in that direction. But they still need young people in the United States to come and do these cold calls and do all the track and trace and all this. And they're going to do the same practice they always have. If they make the challenge, they decide to classify them as exempt, they're not going to be successful long term. They will be a day will come, and that day will come soon. And the liability is it's astonishing, and it's a massive amount. So we'll see what happens. The next phase in the TQL litigation is the damages phase. So liability has been established. It is absolutely the case in Ohio. In this case, you have to pay overtime. The next probably month or two, we'll start getting the data about how much that's going to be, and then it'll be settled or it'll be gone to the verdict will be issued, and then it'll be appealed. Like, there's no doubt in my mind TQL will appeal this thing no matter what.
That was going to be my next question, is how long is this actually going to take?
Yeah, I mean, so a good example of how to think about this is there's a Werner Enterprises case down in Texas, a horrifying, tragic accident, $98 million verdict. Werner's appealing it. There's a lot of facts that are interesting in that case, but it's already over $10 million, maybe closer to $15 million in interest. So if you decide you're going to appeal, you have every right to do so. But that interest doesn't stop. It just keeps ticking up.
I had no idea there was interest on settlement awards.
Oh, yeah. It
makes sense. Otherwise,
there's pre-trial interest and there's post-trial interest, and it's absolutely collectible. So what the people in the TQL litigation are going to be entitled to is all of the back wages, the liquidated damages, which is doubling the initial amount, attorney's fees, pre-judgment, post-judgment interest, and any costs. And the cost, like TQL is going to have to make a website probably and send out letters and emails to every former person in Ohio and say, hey, you're probably part of this class. You're probably entitled to some money. Here's how you file your claim to get your capital. And it's going to be wild. It's going to be very interesting over the next couple months.
Do we know if TQL changed their hiring practices like this when the suit first started, or did they continue as business as usual?
I don't know the answer. So it's conflicting. I've had former TQL people say it's still done as a salary. Some have said it's actually become hourly. It varies state to state, but this is a federal statute. So all honesty, they will all have to be hourly as trainees. There's no doubt in my mind. And other big brokers that have been following the same pathway will have to adopt a new strategy because you cannot do this. It's not sustainable.
I just find it so fascinating that they would not conduct inside counsel or talk with them. I mean, the brokerage I worked for, I think at our peak, we made close to $300 million. Yeah. It's a drop in the bucket compared to $8 billion. And you didn't have in-house. I would imagine you should have an entire legal team of dozens of people inside an $8 billion operation.
So one of the things that's important to note in this litigation was this question of willfulness of TQL violating the law. And what willfulness means in the context of this case is the statute of limitations, like how far they look back, goes from 2 years to 3 years. So if you knew the law and you made the wrong decision, your exposure is increased. So there's an incentive, I think, for some people to have plausible deniability. So in this case, TQL was not found to have willfully violated the law, even though they were they didn't act in good faith to validate the right answer. So here's the question. If you go to outside counsel and they go to me, say, Matt, what should we do? And I say, you should classify them as non-exempt because they're non-exempt. And they say, that's going to hurt our business model. And I say, I don't care about your business model. I'm talking about the law is. And they'd say, well, we'll do our own thing anyway. So there's a level of being able to put your head in the sand and not actually be found to know the answer when there's no doubt, Blythe, they all knew what they were supposed to do. They just chose not to do it. And I understand that mentality to an extent.
Do we know how originally, because if you say 95% of the brokers that came through this meat grinder end up just washing out, how did they start to first formulate that this is wrong, we shouldn't be doing this, we all need to get together and, do something about this?
It takes one person. It takes one brave person who's like, I think that this is wrong, and I'm going to make a claim by myself with a lawyer. And then that lawyer can then explore, are there ways to get more people involved? But at the end of the day, most people don't want to be seen as litigious. Like, they don't want to sue their former companies. They don't want to get that mark on their resume that says, I sue former employers. So for their own preservation, they're not interested in doing that necessarily. The other part of it is it's a culture. Like, if everyone tells you and your HR people tell you, this is the legal way we do it, you don't know any better. I mean, they're not hiring a bunch of lawyers like me to be brokers at TQL. If they did, again, that'd be a bad decision. I wouldn't recommend it. But that's the issue. Like, we don't actually know, how many people find out or how they learn about this. But what they're going to do is they're listening to podcasts like this. They're going to look at articles in FreightWaves and other publications, and they'll understand they do have rights. And then that hopefully gets them moving to make the phone call to the attorney and understand, do I have a claim? What's the process for filing one?
Do you have any kind of guesses on how prevalent something like this is happening across all freight brokerages? Is it 30%, 40%?
Man, we're going to find out. I mean, I guarantee you the next round of these litigations are not going to be just deposing the senior leaders of the folks at the company. They're going to depose the folks at TIA. Oh, wow. And they're going to say, tell me how many more people you told this to. Because there's going to be freight brokerages out there, I guarantee you, 10, 15 people shops that have 4 or 5 employees that are considered exempt, working $32,000 a year at 60 hours a week. There's no doubt in my mind. And in this environment, which we'll talk about Convoy, we'll talk about Slink, you don't have a lot of margin anymore. You don't have the war chest to fight that litigation. And so if you're already on the cusp of insolvency, this will destroy you. Litigation like this costs a company $20,000 to $50,000 a month. And that's before it's in trial. That's just doing discovery. So this stuff, Blythe, it's so exciting. It's so much fun. The lawyers out there, they're chomping at the bit. They're like, wait, there's
the billboards are going up.
They're going up. Every Loves, every TA, Pilot Flying J, call me. I'll get you money. I'll get you paid.
Do you think this is still prevalent in the industry right now?
Oh yeah, absolutely, 100%. I have no doubt. I mean, just from the the inquiries that I've been fielding, that it is absolutely prevalent. It still exists. As to how pervasive it is, I don't know, but it's clear that it's not a rare phenomenon from my encounters with folks in the business.
How do you think this reshapes brokerage as a whole?
I would be very skeptical if a broker can survive in that kind of environment. What I will say is it will exacerbate and accelerate offshoring and automation. Like, a lot of the work that these entry-level people do can absolutely be automated. Like, there's no doubt in my mind.
The
so
tracking
it'll just
and
increase
tracing
it.
and
Yeah, you'll find ways to reduce your cost and reduce your liability. And offshoring saves your life. I mean, saves you in this, because like, there's no overtime when you offshore. I mean, maybe there is locally, but not to the extent we experience in the United States. So I think it just continues this trend that accelerates to automation and offshoring. And the people who survive and want to do it all domestically, they'll have to make some changes. And that means less operating margin, probably.
And probably more investment in technology, which brings us to our next freight drama piece, Convoy. Unexpectedly, or maybe expectedly, depending on how closely you follow the news, declared that they were going under. Or I don't know if that's the right phrasing to use, but they ceased operations in their current form just a week ago.
That's right.
And depending on when you're listening to this, we're recording this in late October. So just a week ago, they ceased operations in their current form and now are exploring technology buyouts. They first entered the scene, I believe, you probably know more about this than I do.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it was like the early, like 2015-ish, 2014.
I was going to say
range.
2013.
Yeah, they're not super old. They're founded by non-trucking people. Go figure. Isn't that exciting? The reality is that Convoy came out thinking that they were going to create an application that truck drivers would use to accept loads. So what Convoy, their thesis was, if shippers use our platform to find drivers, we can automate the finding of the driver. And in that development, they ended up adding trailers into their fleet. They had about 4,000 trailers ultimately. And their belief was they could automate and remove brokerages. That was wrong. That was a dumb idea.
The digital freight brokerage movement, I think, is what they coined.
Yeah, exactly. They really did think that category would remove the general freight brokers. The story of Convoy is fascinating. These guys and gals raised almost $1 billion from a whole bunch of very sophisticated people. And they played a game of how they valued the company. So for your listeners like who like have a little mind for finance, the way we talk about value in transportation is a thing called EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxation, depreciation, amortization. Silly buzzword, but it really just says, how profitable are you? After you take out all this other stuff, how much money do you still have? These digital companies, these software companies, they don't have that. They take $1 and then they spend $1. Or they spend $2. Like, they don't ever actually have general profitability. So when they go to market and they say, how valuable are you? They look at their revenue and they times it by 10. So if I'm a $300 million a year freight broker, like you mentioned before, and I'm a technology company, I'm actually worth $3 billion, which was what Convoy's highest level of valuation
Sounds like
actually
girl
was.
math.
It's absurd. It's pretend. It's pretend money. It's a pretend way of communicating what you do, because they're all trying to say, we're going to be the Facebook of freight, or we're going to be the Amazon of this or that, and we're going to be the Uber of this. And so they get this crazy amount of pretend stuff, but then ultimately the money runs out. And when the money runs out, you don't have a business anymore. And that's the story of Convoy. Convoy was doing great. I mean, they had all the great marketing. They had their logo on all sorts of places. But for them, they weren't actually making money. They weren't profitable. They still had a need for investor capital to help them continue operations. And in this environment, there is no more money. No one's going out there and saying, I'll give you $500 million to keep your brokerage alive. And for Convoy, when the money ran out, the business model imploded. So as of this recording on October 25th, they're not in bankruptcy yet, but they are certainly on the cusp or likely preparing those same files. So this is a freight brokerage that had some software. And now the story we see now is someone might try to buy just the software. I mean, not buy anything else, just the tech. And we'll find out what the value is. But I heard stories of this company going to big enterprise brokers and saying, would you buy me? And they look like, for how much? Like, oh, we want $1 billion. Like, we want our investors to be made whole. People who gave us money want to pay them back. And they're laughed out of the room. They're laughed out of the room. I heard a number, someone had offered Convoy $50 million. Now, this is wild speculation. Don't take anything you hear from this as being accurate, but this is the rumor that I heard. And what a far cry that is. That you take $1 billion in private money and you only have $50 million to show for that. That is absurd. And this is
Who's
the tech
giving these valuations? How did they get? How are they on two different just sides of the spectrum here? Is it basically just you're worth what somebody's willing to pay?
That's to an extent. I think what really the story you tell is, if I can take the market share, I can turn it into money. I can make it really profitable. So give me money and I will buy my way into being a real player. And then eventually I'll have so much market share, I can make some adjustments on the sides, and now we're making a ton of money. So this is how technology has always been done. Like, you look at like Theranos, right? The Elizabeth Holmes, or Elizabeth, I can't remember her name.
Holmes.
Like she went out there and she convinced people she made a testing machine that can do all this magical stuff. And she never did. But the investors, they have a fear of missing out. They don't want to miss the next Facebook. They don't want to miss the next Amazon. And these companies, if they have the right pitch man, they can make you think that they're going to be that thing. So who gives money to Convoy? Well, Bezos did. Amazon did. Like, oh my gosh, how could they fail if Amazon's throwing this money at them? And this was the kind of the behind the scenes thinking, is the smart money will throw at us and we'll eventually get to a place where we're dominant. The challenge they ran into, like everybody, is moving freight is not easy. Like, just because you have an app that a driver may be able to give you track and trace information doesn't mean they're going to do it correctly. And you still have to call if the driver doesn't show up. Like, there's still all these other problems. So this is why Convoy ultimately was unsuccessful. And I think they were too soon. I don't think that their hypothesis is wrong. I just think that ultimately they're not ready in this business. They didn't have enough freight people who understood it.
And so this might sound like a really stupid question. Did they have any traditional brokers that worked in the Convoy office?
Oh yeah, they became a brokerage. I mean, they would take the investor money and spend millions and millions of dollars getting more technologists and getting more software developers. But they absolutely had brokers. Like, they probably needed a lot more brokers. Just like when Uber Freight bought, I think, Transplace, they had to buy the right mentality. And I think that they mistook how valuable actual brokers are. And the brokers that are real, like the real brokers, didn't have a seat at the table as far as I could tell with Convoy. It was all technology people. And they didn't understand when the market shifts, because it always shifts, how you prepare yourself for it.
So where do you think that at its core, because from a lot of, just reading just after this news dropped, reading between the lines, I've never used Convoy software. I wouldn't have a need to. Highly respect, what they were trying to make waves. Ultimately, that you shoot for the moon, sometimes you miss. Especially if you have the biggest criticism I've heard is that they took so much money, but I've still heard that the technology is quite good.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's someone will find value in good technology that can connect you to drivers. Like, there's something really important and useful there. But the reality was, like, you go to the trucker subreddits or the freight broker subreddits, and you see the money that's being posted. It's not great. Like, it's not good, terrific software. It doesn't really do anything revolutionary necessarily. I think if you were to put a fast forward like 10, 15 years, yeah, you'll have autonomous trucks that can take digital requests from a technology like Convoy to go move a load for Procter & Gamble. Like, that makes sense. That'll happen. But as of right now, most drivers multi-home. You cannot, as a truck driver, you cannot live off that app alone and be profitable. You are still going to DAT. You're still going to truck stop. You're still doing whatever you can find. So it was never a solution for everybody. It was a nice to have. When Convoy presented that to shippers, they didn't present it that way. Or to investors, they didn't present it that way. They'd say, we have 80,000 truck drivers or 100,000 truck drivers. Like, how many of them are using your software every day? How often do they open the app up? Oh, once every 2 weeks. Okay, then you don't have 100,000 truck drivers. You have a fraction of that. So it's all about like how they put this together. And I think the investors are not as sophisticated as they think they are. And I think that the technology companies don't do a very good job of understanding the space they actually want to occupy.
So what do you think is next for these digital freight brokerage?
More bankruptcies. I mean, I think that the real takeaway for me, I think the real takeaway, sorry, I'm getting some lag on my side, so I apologize.
No worries.
I think the takeaway is going to be, we're going to see a lot more bankruptcies. Many of these companies were not designed to operate in this environment economically. And the access to cash is not going to be there. The access to debt is not going to be there. Interest rates are high. So the takeaway is going to be some of them will survive, many of them will fail. And that is probably the best possible outcome because we need to have the market reduce capacity for everything. And that may be useful. The bigger takeaway is I think this, like the central thesis is correct. Like, you will not need brokers to do everything. There will be so many other pathways to automate that process. I just think Convoy came in too soon and they didn't have the right leadership to figure out a way to actually transition to a real business.
Are there any brokerages out there that we can kind of like point people to that are doing things, just from an outsider's perspective, doing things the right way, balancing relationships, sales, and technology, that are kind of combining those three things the right way?
Yeah, I would say companies like Freightvana seem from the outside to know what they're doing. I think Loadsmith is also kind of learning that same idea. You need to have access to, for these digital freight brokerages, I think you have to have access to trailers. Like, you're not going to make a great business model without having some trailer capacity you can promise to a shipper. But I think there are some that have not been, if their operations are dependent upon investor capital, they're all going to fail. If their businesses are actually profitable or break even without taking on a bunch of capital or debt, then they're in pretty good shape. So I think there are some that are out there, but those companies don't market themselves as technology companies. They're very clear. Like, we're not, we use technology. You can't run a business without technology, but you're not a technology company. You're a freight broker that has access to technology.
Which I think, when everything is all said and done, I saw someone say this, so I apologize for not crediting you, but the best thing that Convoy did was to force other brokerages to adopt newer technology.
Yeah, I think absolutely that's a great line. I mean, I think that's exactly right. We are in a below average industry. It's a massive industry, but it is not as good as it could be. And there's a lot of things that are wrong. And one of the things that I think is wrong is technologies that aren't connected and not being innovated. Now you look at someone like JB Hunt 360 or Werner with their technologies for drop and hook and power only. They're all going to catch up. They're all there already. And I think we'll see just more of that over time.
Do you think when you say more of that over time, do you see a world where we just have like 5 to 10 really big tech-focused brokerages, or because to me, like, a freight brokerage has always been that thing where you could start and you could, as a blue-collar job, like you could, well, kind of blue-collar, that you could start and, see a pretty good amount of success, even just being a broker, being a freight agent, things like that. Do you see a world where those roles still exist in that way? Or is it a world where like 5 or 10 companies are going to dominate it all?
I think it'll always be highly fragmented, and the value of a broker is not going to go away because they're going to know things that are just not on the technologies out there. That being said, it's not efficient. I mean, in my mind, that's not efficient at all. I think you look back at the idea of like before deregulation, when it was all, a handful of trucking companies did everything. That was a simpler and likely, easier to install model, but it's more expensive. So I think you're going to have the same kind of challenges you see today, just at a different level. So it's still going to be fragmented, still going to have freight brokers, still going to have technology. I do think that it would be nice if we could get a singular system that everyone can understand and use, but everyone is coming out and saying, well, we can do that. Just let it be our platform first. It's like, well, we're not all going to jump to you, you're not all going to jump to me. So it's still going to be fragmented at some extent.
Which I think is good for overall competition. So.
Oh, absolutely. I think when autonomous trucks, if we see the FMCSA come out really hard with a level 4 and level 5 automation, like truly no driver in the truck, then the need and the desire and the ability to do a platform that doesn't involve brokers becomes a lot easier because those robots don't take meal period breaks. They don't take.
I don't know that autonomous trucks are going to happen. I'm one of those. I think the truckers have got to me. I was, definitely like, when you see these trucks up close, and truckers don't kill me for saying this, but they look incredible. The technology is so crazy. It's the LiDAR, and I love, archaeological fan. I love that sort of stuff. So like LiDAR cameras The fact that these things are on the side of a truck, and if you've seen them, like I've seen them at Manifest, the Future of Logistics conference. It's coming up in January. Check my link in case you want to buy your ticket. Save $200. Okay, quick plug. But a lot of those trucks, they're so impressive that you can walk up, and the LiDAR cameras are by far my favorite, just because you can see it in action. Where there was one of these trucks that they had a TV on the hood of the truck, and then people would be walking by on the trade show floor, and you could see the LiDAR camera picking up every arm, elbow, finger, foot on every person that was walking by. Very, truly impressive. But I just, seeing a lot of what's going on with Cruise out in San Francisco, a lot of those issues, with the bottlenecks with the cars actually running someone over and I think dragging them for like 20 feet or something, like a lot of those things. And that's just residential. Yeah. I think residential is incredibly tougher for, autonomous vehicles. I just don't know that I think one bad accident from an autonomous truck, especially on a long haul, and that's going to be it. The government's going to shut it all down.
I don't disagree with you. Here's what I would say. First, I'm going to introduce you to a friend of mine, Michael Wiesinger from Kodiak. I want you to talk with him so you can get.
I have interviewed the founder, Dan.
Okay, there you go.
He's great.
Yeah, so so they are moving freight today with autonomous trucks. Like they are moving things intrastate within a given state. There is a safety driver who is sitting in the truck watching it go. The thing you have to keep in mind is the way I look at this stuff. If it's possible, it becomes inevitable. So deregulation was the biggest innovation our supply chain had in 50 some odd years. Independent contractor, even more so. The ability to control somebody but not have to pay them all these ancillary benefits. So there's no doubt in my mind that these trucks will ultimately be more pervasive. They will become more affordable. And I think there'll be a place where certain routes will be preferred to have robots do it because it'll be consistency. It'll be cost savings. The two biggest costs in transportation are labor and fuel, and they kind of rotate which one's the biggest. Usually it's fuel. But if you can reduce labor costs, that is a way you bring down cost of goods. And you look at things like Outrider. It's an autonomous spotting truck manufacturer. This is on non-DOT regulated soil when they're moving these trucks around inside of a warehouse or a rail yard. So I see it as an inevitability. Now, is it 5 years, 10 years, 15? I couldn't tell you that. But there's no doubt in my mind that if you look at the ATRI surveys, like what motor carriers care the most about, their biggest concerns are about driver compensation, driver retention, driver shortage, and all of those buzzwords are a way of saying
that's going to get people triggered too. Robots. If you say driver shortage.
Yeah, see, I'm with you. I think we have a shortage of drivers who want to do terrible jobs but don't pay very well. Like that's the issue. Is we can't find enough drivers to work for $20 an hour going over the road. They don't want to do that. So yeah, I'm with you. I do think that we'll see robots sooner than later. And for the robots listening, I'm on your side. I will betray the humans in a heartbeat. Like I love the humans; they're great, but I'm on your side.
Yeah, listen, if you can do all of my marketing and cut a good clip for YouTube Shorts, I'm on your side too.
There you go. See, we're aligned.
So I do think, I think fully autonomous, I couldn't even guess if that would ever happen in my lifetime. But I do see a future with having autonomous trucks plus a driver. I still think you need someone there to take over. If, there's congestion on the road, you have to have somebody, make that quick adjustment inside the truck and override the technology. Because sometimes I just think that we're over-reliant on technology when the human mind is still there that can make a good driver is invaluable. An experienced driver is invaluable. The problem is that it's similar to the meat grinder of the freight brokerage industry. You have the meat grinder of the recruiting process of these CDL mills and getting drivers that are being trained by drivers that are, have only been 6 months on the job before they become a trainer. It's that is a level of danger. Like, even though I'm pro driver, but that is such a level of danger that, there's folks out there that are doing a good job of spreading awareness about that. So I think that we need to have like a happy medium with the experienced drivers and technology. It has to somehow come together, because having inexperienced drivers in charge of, something that's, 50,000 pounds, if not more, is just a recipe for disaster, I think.
Oh, you're exactly right. I mean, I think just to build off that, we saw Governor Newsom in California veto a bill that was going to mandate a safety driver in autonomous vehicles for trucking. And so even OIDA, who's the owner-operators, their interest group, they had tried to make sure that Newsom did not veto this, which was, again, letting someone not have a driver inside the truck. If the safety case can be proven out, I think it becomes impossible to stop. At this stage, it's a really good collision avoidance system. Like we have cameras facing the driver, facing outside, all these things, the sensors are everywhere. It is a matter of time before these things become more pervasive. And for my purposes, I don't see how it doesn't happen in a way that is profoundly changing to our industry.
I mean, it could also have a massive effect on, just autonomous technology in general. I was reading a story the other day that was talking about, or I was watching the All In podcast, and David Freeberg, who is my favorite person on that show, he was talking about how much of just from a theoretical perspective that we as a nation have become so risk averse that there's one cruise car accident and we halt the whole damn thing, and we stop progress because of one incident. Yeah. Whereas if you compare it to human drivers, it's still the drunk driving, impaired driving, distracted driving, not wearing a seatbelt are all leading causes of death just across the country. And so if we can have some of these technology solutions that can still give power to the driver, I think there's a happy medium maybe that we can meet in the middle where, you still have the driver that's empowered to make a decision when it calls for it. But, for a lot of the everyday decision making, just taking maybe that decision making out of the hands of the dummies who are drinking and driving and who are impaired driving and, causing accidents and ruining families.
Absolutely. I'm with you there. Absolutely.
All right. And more positive news. The next one on this list is Slink. I'll be honest with you with Slink. This one came out of nowhere for me, and I'm trying to understand where it fits in the overall sort of, I guess, news landscape outside of the owner just stealing money, essentially.
Yeah. I think we can kind of bridge it for both the Convoy discussion and the TQL discussion. So TQL, fundamentally, in my opinion, is a failure of leadership. It's leadership that just was not proactive in being compliant, and that's why they got hit. And then with Convoy, was capital markets shrank, they couldn't raise any more money, and they had to wind down. Slink is a combination of malfeasance of the owner. So Kirshner, I think it's Chris Kirshner's his name. I don't know. I never met him. One of the CEOs of this company, Slink. I, to this day, do not know what Slink did. It sounded like they did something with data and machine learning and algorithms. So
I think they did integration, software integration.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, that's what we need. We need that. We need more of that. So they had raised about $70 million or so over the course of however long they were doing it. And their CEO, Kirshner, he had I think it was their Series B, maybe even Series A, had that money directly funneled to his bank account. And then he bought a jet. And the Securities Exchange Commission said, we don't like that. That's not what investor money is.
As one does.
Yeah, exactly. So he got in trouble. He's under indictment. He's got all the legal stuff going on. But the reality was Slink is a technology company that had been valued at almost $300 million or some bizarre number they had gotten to, which was a function of their revenue times a multiplier. And we see this filing. It's a very strange filing. It's called an assignment for the benefit of creditors. And I'll break it down because it's really interesting. But Clarissa Haas has a great article that came out with FreightWaves talking about this thing. I might have been mentioned in it with just some background.
I did read that article. Great. I love Clarissa.
She's phenomenal. She's great. She's fantastic. But the story is if you're going to go bankrupt, you have to file bankruptcy. A trustee is appointed to administer the state, like the bankruptcy estate, and then that trustee takes whatever assets you have and then hands them out, pays off your legal defense, pays off the trustee court, pays off your secured creditors, pays off your unsecured, and whatever's remaining, if there's anything remaining, that goes to the former shareholders. They get their money, whatever's left, on a proportional basis, and they're done. What Slink opted to do is not do bankruptcy. So bankruptcy has two main things. The first thing is called the stay. The bankruptcy stay says, all of your suits stop now. They're done. And the example I'll give you is in Yellow's bankruptcy, the biggest trucking bankruptcy in U.S. history. they had gotten sued for a violation of a WARN Act. Essentially, like if you're going to do a mass layoff, you got to tell your people. You got to tell them, hey, we're going to lay you off in 2 months. Well, that lawsuit, that litigation, was stopped. And it got brought into the bankruptcy court because the bankruptcy court's saying, I don't care what's happening anywhere else in the country. This is the only thing that we're talking about is the bankruptcy. Everything else is stopped. So the stay is incredibly powerful. The other thing at the end of bankruptcy is the discharge. All your debts are gone. Walk away. Maybe there's a payment plan, maybe not, but you get to get your debts discharged. So the ABC, the assignment for the benefit of creditors, is like a bankruptcy light, for lack of a better word. The company chooses who will be the person who they're going to assign their rights to. So imagine you have your own rights as a person. You just give them to someone to be your power of attorney, or like Britney Spears giving her that power to her parents. That's an example.
Conservatorship.
Exactly. A conservatorship is very similar to an assignment for the benefit of creditors. You're giving all of your rights to this other entity, and they're going to deal with everything. So what we find with Slink's filing, it's really sad. They have about $1 million. They have about $500,000 in cash on hand and about $500,000 in accounts receivable. They have a bunch of laptops, and then they have their intellectual software technologies. And they owe about $1.5 million. So whatever valuation they have, whatever amount of money they brought in, like that is all that's left is about $1 million in cash, bunch of laptops, and some intellectual property. And someone will buy the intellectual property. Someone will buy the laptops. And if there's money left over, the shareholders like Goldman Sachs will get some of that money.
So how is so with the TQL incident, the executives are on the line.
Yes.
For some of that financial obligations, but not in Slink's situation. The executives
so Slink's
are not
situation, like raising money and failing to make a profitable company is not a crime. That's just bad luck as a business, and your shareholders, your investors will lose out their money. What Kirshner did is a crime. Like if you say, I'm going to use this $25 million and I'm going to hire the best developers out there, and I'm going to hire the greatest marketing people you can imagine. And then you say, put it in my personal bank account and I'm going to buy a plane. That's a crime. Like, you're going to have problems. He'll have to reimburse the company, and it may or may not be a good amount. It probably won't be able to be reimbursed. Like they'll sell the plane, whatever else he has.
I was going to say, why don't they just sell the plane?
Oh yeah, they'll sell everything. I mean, they're going to sell it all, and he's probably going to go to jail, I'd suspect. And then that money will go back to the estate back to the company that's been assigned its rights to some other entity. And it might still survive. Like Slink may still live at some point, but as of right now, it's not bankrupt, so it's still alive as an individual business. It's just it's winding down.
It's a lot, but I also especially when the Convoy news dropped, I just couldn't help but think, because I went through a business closure, an abrupt business closure, asset-based 3PL, 10 years ago, shut down abruptly, and it was so traumatizing to have like these outside bankers come into the office and start dictating what you should do, what emails you're allowed to send, just dictating your role like as an employee. And, they start doing a lot of like shady things, and you see all of like the TVs and the chairs and the printers and the computers, they start getting Post-it notes on them, depending on who they're going to sell all of your equipment to. It's like you just watched your entire life career-wise just be put up for auction, and you have no control over it whatsoever. So I have deep empathy for everyone at Convoy, at maybe at Slink, if they're going through the same things. What is there any positives we can take out of these cases? Is it maybe readjusting the market back for better market conditions for the rest of us who have survived? Like what does that look like? So
the most effective companies in the space are able to flex when markets are good and when markets are bad. And I've been in transportation for a minute, right? My dad's a roadway guy. My grandpa had a small fleet of grain hauling trucks. Like ebbs and flows is the business. Like this is how it is. The reality is we don't see a path to real recovery on freight until at the earliest Q2 of next year. I've heard Q4 of next year. I've heard even Q1 of 2025. Same. And if that happens, many companies will fail. Many people experience what you experience, which is watching a company wind down, be auctioned off, chopped up, and pieced out to make the shareholders and make the debtors get their money back. I don't think there's any real silver lining other than we must have the capacity removed. Come heck or high water, there's a great number of companies that will not survive.
And it's like you said earlier, the cream rises to the top.
Yeah, I mean, this is the way it's always been. Like, that's the thing is, like, this is a bad turn, maybe worse than maybe on par with 2008. But the reality is, like, this is how it's always been. It's always been feast, famine, and people get sent home because there's no work for you today. And I think this will just encourage people when they look to make jobs and make changes is look for companies that are really stable. Publicly traded multinational corporations are probably going to be fine. Like, they're going to be fine. It's these small mom and pops, these privately held, or any company that exists off of investor cash. If the business is all about, like, we finished our Series B and we raised $10 million, that money will be spent in 12 months, and then you have to get more money. And if you haven't shown the thesis that you're correct in your assumptions, that will go bankrupt too.
So I guess sort of the next phase of this conversation. Hopefully you don't have to go anytime soon.
No, I have all the time in the world for you,
Just
Blythe.
wanted to make sure.
We're good.
Because I wanted to say, too, that unfortunately that company I worked for 10 years ago closed down, but they were also started in late 2008, 2009. So they started in the middle of a downturn, probably one of the worst freight recessions that we've ever seen. So I do think that we're going to see, that's where the new businesses are sort of, what is the analogy that, like, the forest fire burns everything down so new growth can start. So I think that that's probably a safe analogy moving into 2024 and 2025. But I also think it's a good indicator if you are, maybe you're listening to this and you're one of those unfortunate employees. First of all, I'm sorry that you're going through all of this, but I also think that it's an opportunity maybe to think about entrepreneurialism, which is, something that both of us have taken the leap on. And, for you in particular, I'm just curious, you have Armchair Attorney. Yes. You are still a practicing lawyer, or?
I am. Yeah, absolutely. I practice. I dabble.
Okay. And what else do you have? I know you got a bunch of other things going on. So I wanted to talk to you about that as well.
Yeah. So my background is eclectic, as you kind of mentioned. So the Armchair Attorney is a law firm that I own and operate. I have a very small client base. It is my hobby. I'm very clear about that. It is a hobby to run my law practice. Very, very limited client base. I like it that way. I have a software company that is for the inspection and repair of commercial trailers because I love trailers. And then I am currently the vice president of sales and marketing for a company called Contract Leasing Corporation, a 32-year-old trailer leasing business with over 18,000 trailers in circulation. I work underneath the founder, Mike Gore. It's a fantastic business. And I finally get to put my love of commercial trailers and my desire to help people understand things together. And so those are the things that I do. I'm a gecko enthusiast. I have 4 children. I have a 10-year-old, a 7-year-old, and I have twins that will be 1 year on November 15th.
They are so cute.
They're ridiculous. Oh, I have no idea what I'm doing.
It's a favorite part of my Twitter/X feed is seeing the updates of your children's growth progress.
Oh, they're walking now and they're making noises. It's just, it's absurd. It's not what I anticipated at all, but it's going fast. They say the days are long, but the years are fast. And these years are very, very fast.
And so one thing that I don't hear people often say is, I love trailers.
Yeah.
So where does that stem from?
Oh, my gosh. Blythe, this is my most favorite thing to talk about. So I mentioned my father, roadway guy, 1976. First job was night supervisor at their facility in Chicago Heights, managing union mechanics, suit and tie every day, every night, really. It wasn't until 1991 that he had a chance to bid on a garage for a company called RPS. So RPS stood for Roadway Package Systems. So the old days, CF, which is Consolidated Freightways, Roadway, and Yellow were the trucking companies. They were everything. Everything we see today, like people say, oh, I'm ex-Google, I'm ex-Apple. No. Are you ex-Roadway? Are you ex-Yellow? Oh, I want to talk to you because that's interesting. But our job with my father's company called Outsourced Fleet Services was maintaining equipment for RPS. And RPS only had trailers and dollies, the things that connect the trailers together when you have pups. That company eventually became FedEx Ground. And so we were the biggest vendor of maintenance for FedEx Ground for 20 years. And what we did was we fixed trailers for money. So trailers are something that I deeply, deeply care about. Now, we talk about transportation, and transportation is really an exercise in trailers. So something is made and it's put into a container. And in that container is a type of trailer tossed on a boat. The boat brings it to a port. The port takes it off the boat and either puts that container, which I think is a trailer, onto a train, which is a type of trailer, or onto a chassis, which is absolutely a trailer. Those things then go to a distribution house or a warehouse or a break bulk center, and they get taken off the one container and they get put onto a dock and then likely into a trailer. Now that trailer, Blythe, that trailer's journey can go anywhere, like a truck stop or a warehouse or a distribution center. And that stuff in the trailer gets unloaded and then put on a shelf or brought to your front door. And so trailers are all that matter in supply chain. The track and trace, the Project 44s, the Four-Kites, all of these guys and gals are looking for information about the truck. Where's the driver? What's he doing? Is he going to be there on time? It's all a proxy for one thing, the trailer. It's where is the box with the things that I want? You ask me, Matt Leffler, what do you want to know most about the shipment that you have coming in? I want to know when it's going to be here. Like, I don't care if the driver's on his rest period or on his 10-hour sleeper berth. I really just want to know about that box. So there are 5 million trailers in the United States. 5 million. About 80% of those are dry vans with swing doors. So I love trailers. I can talk about trailers forever, but I love trailers.
You're kind of blowing my mind right now because I just assumed it's going to sound like such a dumb question. Are all semi trucks technically trailers?
So no, a truck is not a trailer. I mean, truck is the proxy. It's the power source. So in our business,
okay,
we ask if you ask to a motor carrier, how many piece of equipment do you have? It's power, which is the truck. It's either a box truck, it's a straight truck, it's a Class 8 truck, sleeper or day cab. That's the power unit. The trailer,
okay.
The trailer is going to, and a tractor is a term of art. Tractor trailer means trailer. So it means like the 53-foot trailer, the 28-foot pup, whatever. But the trailer is the thing that is where all the freight goes inside. Like, you can't put freight in the sleeper. You got to put it all into this beautiful, beautiful box with tires.
So, well, I used to, because I have this book back here called The Box, which talks about the revolution, or I guess the revolutionary concept of creating a container.
Containerization, absolutely.
Yeah, and how it's the single greatest invention because it brought the most people out of poverty all across the world, streamlined shipping and transportation options. So now maybe are trailers more revolutionary than the containers?
So containerization was about bringing a process and a set of dimensions that we all agreed with. So it's really funny because, like, we say containerization, but there's two types of containers. They're either 20 feet long or they're 40 feet long. So they call them, if you look at the stuff that comes out like on any board about this, like data, they call them TEUs, 20-foot equivalent units. So a 40-foot container is actually two 20-foot equivalent units because it's just two of the 20s. But so the container, so in a container setting, a container is like a marine container. It's intermodal. It can go to multiple forms of transportation. So it can work on a boat, it can work on a train, and it can work on a truck. So that's what makes the containerization model so amazing. You can get all of the cranes that lift them up to be uniform. That uniformity brings a level of consistency that was never there before. It was always like, hey, I got this trailer full of floor sweepers. Like, what do you want me to do with it? I don't know. Move it to Dallas. So this is why containerization is absolutely one of the biggest innovations, but it was predicated on the chassis and the trailer and being able to move those things together. So containers are, in my mind, a form of trailer. And I think the chassis that they sit on top of is also a trailer.
That was going to be my next question. I'm like, what's the difference between a chassis and a trailer?
Yes! Okay, so a chassis, this is beautiful. This is like 4 more hours of this. We're in good shape. So a chassis is the subframe and the tires. So a chassis really is just a BLT, brakes, lights, and tires. It's beautiful and delicious. You have the chassis pulled by the power unit, whether it's a drayage company or a motor carrier, whatever they are. That container gets onto the chassis and it gets locked together with a pair of pins. And those pins make it so if it doesn't fall off, because that would suck if it fell off. So the main types of trailers in our country, there's about maybe 700,000 to 800,000 chassis in the United States. Most of them are owned by 3 companies. Those 3 companies are DCLI, Track, and FlexiVan. Those 3 own 80% of all chassis in the United States and likely in North America. They are at the rails or at the ports or everywhere. Then there's like people who own their own chassis like JB Hunt or Schneider. And there's companies like me, CLC. We lease them. So I own about 3,000 chassis. I lease them out to people whenever they want them. It's a really cool business. And then the trailers, the big vans and all that, there's about, like I said, 5 million of those guys. And about 80% are 53-foot vans with swing doors because that's for truckload. And then if you're talking LTL, it's pups, 28-foot pups with roll-up doors. Doors and tires.
How are they evenly, I guess, we said, 3 companies own the majority of chassis. What about trailers? Is it kind of the same dynamics or is it more
That's
fragmented?
A really good question. I would say there is a disproportionate amount of trailers owned by the mega carriers, though small fleets also have it. So in the old days, and I mean like pre-deregulation, you used to have one piece of power with about 7 to 10 trailers. So that was the dichotomy, is you'd have 1 to 7 or 10. As time has gone on, we have connected systems, we have telematics. There's not the need to have so many. These days, the margins tend to be 1 power to probably 1.5 to 3 trailers. So if you're a company that's an asset-based company, and you run trucks, you probably have a handful of trailers. So it's the same kind of disbursement you'd have with just power units generally. The vast majority of trucking companies are less than 6 trucks, but they're mostly power only. They're mostly just drivers and sleepers. On the other side are the mega fleets that have hundreds of thousands. So like Extra Lease owns 100,000 trailers in their fleet. FedEx has 100,000 trailers. Hunt has probably 200,000 if you count the chassis, the containers, and the vans. So I love it.
And I imagine this is where your software comes into play.
Yeah.
If you're ready to talk about it, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
if you are.
I'd love to. So my software stuff was a labor of love. If you look at the numbers, 1 in 5 commercial vehicles on the highway at any given time are unsafe. Like they're not legally allowed to be on the road. That's 1 in 5. That's 20%. Like Blythe, if I said to you, hey, I have 5 gallons of milk here. One of these gallons of milk is unsafe, but I don't know which one. You're probably going to say, Matt, I don't want to buy any of those milks. And I'm going to say, you don't get a choice because that's all that it is. So my thought process as a lawyer has always been, if you maintain things properly, you are going to have a lot safer vehicles and a lot less, injuries and uninterrupted freight delivery is really important. Like on time, undamaged, safe is critical. So my software, I incubated with Michelin last year. We got our seed capital from Michelin to build out the prototype, the MVP. That was finished in, I'd say, September. And over the last few months, we've been getting ready to deploy it in its initial testing. And it's really about scheduling trailer services. So the company's called Leffler Technologies, but the product is called Trailer PM. And the PM stands for preventative maintenance. Like car wash is a phrase. Trailer PM is the same sort of thing. It's like you want to get your trailer inspected. Well, I have people who can inspect your trailers. And then you can document it digitally. And it's just about making the process of scheduling a service easier because most people don't necessarily know how to do it. And having been I've done hundreds of thousands of services with trailer companies for my career. So I know like a thing or two about trailer and I love it.
I'm sitting here and I'm thinking back to like 2020 when we're all stuck in our offices and we can't go to anywhere and we can't network with anyone. And so you see this sort of just massive boom of content creators within the logistics space going on. You were one of those folks. And now you have a whole ass business, a whole ass software offering, SaaS product that you've likely connected with other folks using content marketing. I think you have such a great story of seeing what's going on in the market, giving your perspective on it, and then seeing problems that you can expertly fix based on your experience and your expertise, and then going and doing it. I think that's such a beautiful thing. And I think that your story is, as we started off with the first hour of this show, talking about all the bad things that are going on, I think more light should be shined on folks like yourself who did it the bootstrapped way, who have a business that will probably be profitable like right from the jump. I just, congratulations on all the movements and things you've been doing. And I think it's the power of content marketing in this space.
I appreciate that. Blythe, I learned a lot from you. Like, you don't know it, but like we've talked about this before, but you were one of the first people out there who were making consistent content that was really interesting and useful. Like, I didn't watch Freight Waves most of the time. I watched your content because you're good at what you do. I found it to be cathartic for me. Like, I started off making things that were just for me. Like, if you find my earliest stuff, it's really, really, really rough. And that's okay because I found joy in the process. What I found the most interesting over time was the amplification of important things. And so we talked about the TQL thing as a good example. The Echo and the C.H. Robinson lawsuits around misclassification, those are forgotten. No one knows. I mean, industry folks that were involved know, but young brokers have no concept of this. The power we have in our voices to talk about things that matter is incredible. And people like you can put their thumbs on the scale and put out messages that people in the past could never hear. So this has been like an amazingly positive part of the journey. I will say that I don't view myself as a content creator or an influencer. I look at myself as a megaphone screaming into the void. And like, some people listen, they go, man, I love that thing. And some people don't. I assume no one listens to anything that I do. But then I get feedback and people reach out and they say, I've enjoyed it. I like it. I want to learn more. And the more you dig into this industry, it's fascinating. And it's also very depressing.
I say on the show all the time, we have so many stories to tell. So many, and within your own organization of what kind of freight you're moving and versus like the stories that you're telling and shining a light on. I'm curious if there's any underlying, maybe legal issues or crime stories. Fraud is obviously a huge issue going on within the industry. Is there anything that we should be paying more attention to that isn't getting a lot?
Yeah. So there's so much, and I'll say that the one case that I'll start with is one I briefly alluded to called Werner Enterprises, and it's down in Texas. This story, you've probably seen it. Most people, your viewers, have probably heard about this. But the story goes: truck driver is driving in the snow, and he's going 50 miles an hour under the posted speed limit, never loses control. In the opposite lane, opposite side of the direction of traffic, another pickup truck is driving. That pickup truck loses control, crosses the center line, smashes in head first into that Werner truck. One child dies, another child is permanently injured. Question is, who's at fault? Who's responsible? It goes to trial. And Werner is found to be 70% responsible. 70%. This is a trucking company that never lost control of the asset, under the posted speed limit. The verdict, $98 million. $98 million. And here are the facts that were not in Werner's favor. The driver had been driving for less than 7 days. Brand new CDL driver. The trainer was asleep in the berth, wasn't paying attention. The dispatchers hadn't warned this driver about driving in bad weather. This driver had never driven in bad weather. And he was told, you must make this time. You must make it there. So why this case is so interesting right now is, one, should anyone expect someone else to lose control of their car on the opposite side of traffic and hit you, and you could be responsible? That's crazy. That's bonkers. It's absurd. More importantly, if you are following this thing called F4 preemption, the idea of broker liability, you could be a broker who brokered that truck to move that load. Let's say it's not Werner. Let's say it's a random trucking company. You, Mr. or Mrs. Broker, could be the one who gets sued for $100 million. and you would have no way to protect yourself. So this thing is going to the Texas Supreme Court. It will go there, and that's where it's going to live and die. It can't go to the U.S. Supreme Court. It's a state issue only. But if this type of stuff happens, Werner self-insures for $10 million. They have an umbrella policy for anything above $10 million. With the interest we talked about, they're over $115 million right now. This case should make everybody go, what?
Yeah, I cannot believe that would even be something that could be brought to trial.
So Werner thought that the same thing. Werner thought they were going to do they were going to get it dismissed and say, look, there's no legal liability for us because our guy was going safely. He didn't lose control. He didn't go crash into someone else like literally from the other side of the road smashed me. And they made the critical error that any lawyer who worked their mettle, and I don't want to put slag at other lawyers, you never go to trial if there's a dead child involved. You just don't do it. Like, it doesn't matter what the jury hears you say. All they're going to say is, how much liability insurance did the pickup truck driver have? Oh, like $100,000, $200,000. How much do you have? Oh, unlimited. Yeah, this kid's going to need therapy for the rest of their lives. This mother lost her son. Like, this is why you don't take those cases to trial. But Werner may be successful on appeal. Hard to say. But if that stands, the liability insurance that people are going to have to buy, it's going to be very expensive. It's already very expensive.
It's a lot.
Isn't it heavy?
It's a lot.
It's
we
so
covered.
heavy. I know.
I do feel like I have to say that, I mean, obviously that story is tragic. And it's something that, could be industry changing along with the TQL verdict. I'm tired of talking about these depressing stories. I don't know how to segue into something a little bit more lighthearted.
Go back
I
to
thought we
trailing.
did.
I mean, the thing is, like, the trends I think are important. The things to note for all your audience is if you're a worker, you have a lot of rights. You don't know about those rights. Schools need to do a better job of educating people about what their rights are, especially things like non-competition agreements and how to negotiate those things. I feel like we are seeing, as the industry continues to be in this dark slump, there are positive things coming from this. There's more accountability, and we're seeing the fraud. Like, in the good times, you don't see the fraud. You don't see the theft. You just see everyone making a bunch of money. When the tide's lower, every ship begins to sink, and you can see who the bad apples really are. And that's important. I mean, we all have to behave like someone is watching us, because someone probably is. So I think there's some positivity coming out of this insofar as it's showing us the actors we didn't like TQL, are actually worse than we thought, which is great. Really
I don't think you're going to be invited to any TQL events anytime soon.
They won't let me follow them on Twitter. I'll be honest with you. I've tried. They won't let me. They will not.
I thought they had their tweets protected.
They do. I can't even look at them. For a while, I was harassing them on LinkedIn. I would say harassing. That's not the right word. I was engaging. I was engaging with them. They weren't very big fans. But for some reason, if I ever go and look like who's looking at my profile, it's a lot of people from TQL. It's a lot of them.
Poor social media manager. It's just like, let me post in peace.
We just gave them a great thermos. Why are they talking about non-competition agreements?
Where are we at with non-competition agreements? Is that an issue still?
Yeah, I mean, so for those of you who've been following this, there's been this thing called the Federal Trade Commission, and they put out a proposed rule that would ban non-competes for everybody. So let's talk about some statistics. About 1 in 5, 30 million American workers have a non-compete. 30 million people as a condition of employment. About 30 to 40% of those people make under $15 an hour. So it's a really interesting thing. They are disproportionately affecting, all sorts of different protected classes. That's just the fact. Like, the history of these things is also fascinating. But the FTC came out and said, look, we believe that because of non-competes, American workers are making $300 billion less a year than they're supposed to be. Because the non-compete makes so you can't go and get another job or make your own company. So it artificially depresses your compensation. So the FTC said, we're going to ban these things. And over 20,000 comments were made. One of them was made by the American Trucking Associations. They believe they're great. Go figure. But the FTC will have a final rule probably next year, and it'll likely ban non-competes. The problem is that it is unlikely that the Supreme Court would allow that type of rule to pass. So there's this thing, and this is going to be esoteric, so I apologize. There's a thing called the non-delegation doctrine. All it means is if you're Congress, you shouldn't give authority to an administrative agency unless you've expressly said that. And the case I'll use is, you might remember, during COVID, OSHA said we're going to mandate vaccinations for people with over 100 employees. And everyone was like, what? Like, when did OSHA get the authority to mandate vaccinations? Like, who gave them this authority? So that was sued. It went to the appellate courts, it went to the Supreme Court. At the Supreme Court, they asked the question, does OSHA have the authority to mandate vaccinations? The liberal minority said, yes, they can. The conservative majority said, no. If you want to give people vaccinations, go back to Congress and ask them to mandate it. Don't come to us and make us do it. So that is the example of the non-delegation doctrine. So the FTC is going to put out a rule and say, we want to ban non-competes. What American businesses are going to say is, why are you getting involved in a contract between me and my employee? They can choose not to sign it. I don't make them sign it. Why are you getting involved? And the Supreme Court in this environment is likely to say, go back to Congress and ask for something. So there is another thing. It's called the Workforce Mobility Act. It is a bipartisan piece of legislation in both the Senate and the House that is stuck in committee that would ban non-competes as well. If that were to get passed and signed, that would ban them and would be okay. I think the FTC's action is likely not going to be effective. I think it's going to be overridden. I don't think it's going to be legally enforceable. I could be wrong, but our court is very conservative and very hostile to things like this.
And I've heard of even like fast food workers. Like if you work at like a sandwich shop,
yeah,
you're being forced to sign a non-compete, so you can't go work at another sandwich shop.
So that was the Jimmy John's case. This is good. Great sandwiches, freaky fast. They also had freaky non-competition agreements. These guys, they had a 2-year non-compete that would affect anybody within 3 miles of a Jimmy John's store. So if you work for Jimmy John's, you can't work anything within 3 miles of a Jimmy John's. If that company had 10% of their revenue coming from like cold sandwiches. And they were suing. They would sue people. Trunk Club in Chicago, like you would send us your dimensions. We'll send you outfits that look really nice. The designers, non-competition agreements. You can't go work for another company designing outfits. It's pervasive. This is the thing that I think is, since we're towards the end, I like this part. So the history of non-competes, Blythe. Have I ever talked about where these things came from?
I don't think so, but it sounds like some kind of like corporate America BS.
Oh, it's so much worse than that. So after the Civil War, we had this freeing of slaves. We freed the slaves. And one of the things that the South did was say, well, how can we prevent our former slaves, now workers, from going and working somewhere else? Non-competes began as a method to circumvent the slavery abolition. They became the way you'd say, you can't go work over here. I have been trying for the last year or so for people to understand that non-compete agreements are not about contractual rights between workers and their bosses, though they are. They are an aspect of diversity, equity, and inclusion because they were designed and they disproportionately affect people that are in protected statuses because we knew what we were doing. We knew exactly what it was. You're not going to go work at the neighbor's plantation because he'll pay you 25 cents an hour more. You're going to work here. If you go there, I'll sue you. And the old days, like a lot of things had happened in the old days. So these things exist because of that. That is their history. And companies who don't understand or do understand and just don't care, they're wrong. They're wrong. But that's the breaks.
I don't. Why treat your employees better when
No.
you could just sue them into oblivion or scare them into, that you're going to threaten legal action?
Absolutely. I mean, we look at TQL, it's like the poster child. They sue everybody. They hire people knowing that 95% will not stay. Those 95% will never get a job in transportation, at least for a year because of the non-compete. And they also steal from their workers. Like, if any company should fail, it should be them. That they're not going to because they're making a bunch of money. So, very fun. It's exciting. That's why they invite me to their cocktail parties.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to get an invite anytime soon.
And I think
it really is an important thing, because think of all of those people that we turned away from the industry that maybe could have found a really good home and excelled and made a really good life for themselves, and instead they were put through the meat grinder, as you say, and now they'll probably never come back because of the way they were treated.
And this is the thing I think is so diabolical, is it means that you're not going to become an entrepreneur. You're not going to be able to grow in this space. We want talented people that are excited about this business, and we do everything to make it impossible. And so I look at this and I get excited because people are finally talking about it, and they're finally motivated. Like the people that I hear from all the time, they're pushing back, and I like that. But it is a very dark chapter in our country, and I look forward to the day that non-competes are gone.
All right, couple last questions.
Yeah. I try to be excited and happy. Like, we're just talking about the most depressing things in the world.
But it's we have to talk about these things, right? Because education is powerful, and the more you know, the better situations that you can put yourself in, you can put your clients in, your business partners in. So it is better for the industry to sort of shine a light on a lot of the pardon my French, the fuckery that's going on.
It's so bad. It's so bad.
Correct it. Because otherwise these, shady actors, which there's always been shady actors in transportation since the dawn of time, being able to shine a light on them, to weed them out. So the cream rises to the crop is sort of a theme of today's episode. But one final question. Were you one of the 30% of people that actually made it through all episodes of Rings of Power?
Those are hurtful words, and of course I did. I did.
I did too.
I'll say, I
think I said that stat wrong real quick. 67% of people who started Rings of Power never finished it.
Yeah.
That is an astonishing stat for a TV show that had $1 billion put into.
Yeah, there's a big hole in my heart, almost the same size as the plot holes within Rings of Power. I know it's got problems. I know, I do. I hope that we get to hear stories that were never told and never even contemplated by Tolkien, like in the far, far west, like in maybe the Blue Wizards we get to see. Like I'm hoping. Can we talk spoilers? Or can we not talk spoilers? I don't want to.
Yeah, we can talk spoilers. No, you don't wait. First of all, audience, don't waste your time watching this garbage show. Just go watch the movies, read the books, watch some quality programming, the extended editions.
I hope that's not Gandalf. It should not be Gandalf. He was not there in the Second Age. He was there in the Third Age. There's no point to have him there. I think the reveal of Sauron was, I liked it. I liked that part of it. Galadriel is far better in the books and in the movies and in the story. She seems like a petulant child. I did not like her as a character at all. It was very disappointing.
An abomination is what they did to Galadriel.
She's one of the most powerful elves alive. She existed.
Smart, wisdom. Yeah. You didn't need to put a sword in her hand for her to be
giant.
Strong.
She's like 6 feet tall. She's yes.
Her hair was not a raggedy mess like it is in Rings of Power. Yes. Her hair is literally compared to the light of the two trees.
Yeah, that's what it was. Exactly right. That's why Feanor asked for her hair, and she denied him. Gimli
three times. I think she denied him.
It's right. Gimli asks one time, and he gets 3 hairs. Like that is incredible. That moment, like when I was watching it, I teared up. I'm like, that is amazing. The Balrog should not have been shown. That Durin's Bane has nothing to do with the Second Age. Like this is more like fan fiction at this point. No, the Balrog.
Like you have Elrond, like walking to the where did he walk to in like dress robes? They took no water. They took no supplies. They just casually took a little walk.
Mithril does not come from lightning strikes. I am fundamentally like that is the stupidest thing.
And you know what too? The forging of the rings would have been so great to show, except for they showed it in the wrong timeline. They put Galadriel there when she wasn't there in the forging of the 3 rings, and then they made it that you have the Sauron. I don't know, was it Great Value Sauron that is essentially telling the world's greatest smith how to mix metals. And it's like, this is
metallurgy. Never heard of that.
basic knowledge that he should have. And yet you have this great value Sauron coming in to save the day.
I think it was like the 9 rings that went to the men and the 7 went to the dwarves. Like those rings were all made first. Like the 3 rings the elves had were not made anywhere near Sauron being there. He left. He did not know they were making them. And he gave all those rings to the elves, and then the elves, put them on. Then he put his 1 ring on. They're like, "Oh, take them off. We don't want this." So I'm gonna watch it. Like I'm gonna watch the next.
I'm probably
season.
gonna hate watch it too.
That's right. That's all.
That's the thing, and I'm gonna be so mad. I've never been so just watching any show ever. I've never been so mad each week, just angrily turning it on. Like it got to the point where like. My fiance watched the first episode with me, and he fell asleep during the middle of it, woke up, and he just sees me like just seething, just mad. And he's like, ooh,
rage.
Never watched another episode with me. I guess, following a similar format to the rest of the show, we start with the bad and end with the good. We do have, some sort of nature's healing moments where Peter Jackson is coming back to the Tolkien Middle-earth universe.
I didn't know this.
He's making an animated show, sort of a Lord of the Rings anime style of the War Rohirrim. So the Riders of Rohan, that's going to be the show that he is making next.
I want to pitch to you a watch party that we do for Rings of Power. That would be great. I think the fans would be so excited for the opportunity to listen to articulate,
see me like break a bottle on the ground.
We're just pouring just tons and tons of drinks. Just like it's going to be fine. We're going to keep going. It's going to be amazing. I can't wait.
I like chaos, so I'll do it.
What's your alignment? You chaotic, neutral?
What do you mean? What's my alignment?
Like, you never played D&D?
Oh no, I didn't.
Okay,
that's one nerd culture that I did not get. It felt very. I did love the movie. I saw the movie recently.
I have not seen the movie.
Really
I want to see that movie.
The movie is really cute. It's funny. It's it's got all. It's good. But I never got into D&D. And it just wasn't my thing. So I'm sorry.
I can understand that. I played in a basement rolling my D20, and it was.
I do think the culture around that is really cool. Like I just saw it. Speaking of which, I just saw a TikTok creator who like specializes in making a holder for all of the dice and your. I don't know. It looked cool.
Yeah, I have a whole bunch of dice. You need like a 4-sided die, a 6-sided, a 8-sided, 12-sided.
Well, it had magnets and everything in it, so it looked very nice. So I love the culture of D&D. It seems like they have a really powerful little fan world to live in. But I live on the Lord of the Rings side of things. I was on the Star Wars side of things for a very long time. I'm a little disenfranchised.
I like Next Generation. Next Generation, Star Trek, with Picard.
No, Star Wars.
Star Wars. I said Star Trek. Star Wars. Is that that Boba Fett guy? Best bounty hunter who then became a local crime lord? That show is depressing.
No, he didn't really become a crime lord. He became nothing. Like he just did nothing.
Let's take the most exciting character and interesting character, bring him back to life, and let him run a small
and then not even put him in 2 of his own episodes. In his own show.
Don't let him wear his cool helmet. Just let him walk around and.
Just bring Mando back, Baby Yoda, and it'll solve everything.
And he was also in Game of Thrones. He was the guy
Oberyn.
from Dorne. Yeah,
Oberyn Tyrell. No, not Tyrell. It's not Tyrell.
Martell.
Martell.
Maybe I don't know.
Tyrells were Marjorie.
Yes.
God, what is her name? The older woman who had that great line, "Tell Cersei it was me."
Oh yes. Oh God, these names I should know better.
I know.
It's been a minute.
All of these fake world histories that we know.
If people are going to be listening for that part, they're like, wait, they're going to try and remember these different fantasy worlds, and they're going to be like, this is the best part.
They just sort of all like meld together. But yeah, I would say Game of Thrones, like Westerosi is definitely, I would say my rankings, and then I want to hear yours. So I would definitely do like Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones / House of Dragon, and then I'd probably go Harry Potter still, and then maybe Star Wars. I think that's my nerd fandom hierarchy. And Marvel, I got to put Marvel in there too.
I've become enamored with Castlevania. Like there's a lot of good anime stuff. Like I played all the games, like Symphony of the Night. I really love those. I'm really loving the Boys and Gen V stuff too. Like that is on Amazon. It's like superhero stuff. Very cool. But yeah, for me, Lord of the Rings takes it in a big way. I think if we stay in the same fantasy world, Dragonlance is also really, really good. These were like, there's hundreds of books of these characters that were in like medieval kind of stuff. It's fantastic. It's so good. Oh, I had so many books when I was a kid. And then I'd say Game of Thrones. I like Game of Thrones. I didn't like the writing very much in Game of Thrones. It just seemed, I don't know. I liked it for the most part, but I got to a point where it reminded me too much of the Silmarillion, like just history stuff, and I just didn't like that. And I hated the Silmarillion. I hated that book.
It is a tough read, a very tough read.
It's a history book without any real things happening.
It is. I haven't picked up that book, I don't know, since I was a teenager.
But there are so many cool stories, like Glorfindel killing a Balrog by himself, like that. Or Feanor fighting a bunch of Balrogs. Like there's great stories, but yes, they're hard. They're difficult.
That's why I like the
through.
Guidebooks, like the handbooks that like explain what different things are. Like I used to have the guidebook, like the almanac almost, or the thesaurus, whatever it's called, or the Guide to Middle Earth. And then I would be reading it at the same time, and I'd have to look up what each thing meant. And then I started just reading the guidebook after that. Well,
like there's Fandom has a great set of information about it, and then Nerd of the Rings is also like a YouTube channel. Fantastic. I love his content. It's excellent.
Yeah, it's a lot of different, like YouTube. When the YouTube sphere, I first started getting into YouTube because of Game of Thrones, so I would watch all the history lore videos on there. Yeah. And then I would say Glass Half Full with Rings of Power coming back in the YouTube era. It led to so many new YouTube channels covering it, but it also like Emergency Awesome or like a Screen Crush or these guys that I watch specifically for like their Star Wars takes or Marvel takes. I started listening to them on the Lord of the Rings or the Rings of Power. I'm like, no, wrong, like arguing with them in the bathroom.
Not real. You're wrong.
Wrong, Charlie.
No, don't like it. Don't like it. I hope we see. Maybe a Tom Bombadil or someone really neat would be cool. Like to see some like.
I don't trust Amazon to do. If Peter Jackson couldn't do that character justice, I damn sure don't trust Amazon to do it justice. It's hard to
explain. You're right. I don't think we're going to see that. I look forward to like the falling of Numenor will be interesting. Like the way that it fell in the books is really interesting. And if we see that same sort of thing, like we saw she had a vision of it happening, so that's going to be really cool.
If she can see,
I love it. I enjoyed it. I did not like any of the characters at all, but I did like the fact that we have the world of hobbits again, kind of.
God, they were the most annoying thing, little jerks.
We're
one person gets injured, they just leave them behind.
Leave you behind. Yeah. Very slowly walking away. Yeah, they're all monsters. Like I don't doubt you. Like that's where probably Schmeagol comes from, I suspect. They settle down on a river somewhere.
They have evil in their bones. And they tape branches to their head and think that it's camouflage. Anyways, I don't know. I've already said enough nice things about Rings of Power.
So I guess we gave them the eyeballs. We needed to give them eyeballs. And I think it's important that our culture knows how great Tolkien was, even if they forget the books ever existed.
No, they need to remember how good the books were and how... I think that Tolkien was maybe one of the last creators to devote his entire life to something. Maybe George Lucas, of course, too. Yeah. And George R.R. Martin, to an extent, maybe J.K. Rowling as well. But Tolkien devoted his entire life to creating this universe and just, maybe completed 60% of it. It was really up to his family, his son, to be trusted with respecting what he wanted for that lore and then to continue to build on it. And that's what I hope, as far as like overall just Rings of Power in general, I hope that it creates other things that are more faithful to what Tolkien originally envisioned, especially if, as AI increases and, the capabilities for some of these smaller creators to really be able to make a fan fiction that is good.
Put a VR headset on. You can like live in that. That would be amazing.
It'd be Ready Player One. I'd just never leave the house. I already got the Gandalf staff here in the back that I could take with me.
Just screaming, "You shall not pass."
I have that sign on my office door. It doesn't work, by the way.
I think if we do see the FMCSA put out a speed regulator of 68 miles an hour, then you shall not pass in the back of a trailer. Would be fantastic. Everyone would be
That's
so
perfect.
Happy.
We tie. You found a great way to tie it all together with all the drama that's going on in freight, all the drama that's going on in TV. It's a good opportunity to use platforms like this to be able to talk to experts like yourself and be able to get just a clearer head about what the hell is going on in the industry. So hopefully, next time we have you on the show, it not much time passes, but hopefully we're talking about less drama and like more fun things about like trailers and cool stuff going on in freight.
I hope we can do that. I will say it's going to be a very dark few months. We're going to see a lot more chaos and a lot more interesting companies not doing so well. But we will have good things to talk about. And anytime I can come back, Blythe, I'm a fan.
Well, until then, where can folks follow you, follow more of your work?
Oh, yeah. You can find me on LinkedIn, Matthew Leffler, my law firm, armchairattorney.com. TikTok, I'm Armchair Atty, A-T-T-Y. It's not particularly good, but there's lots of gecko videos. On Twitter or X, Armchair Atty, A-T-T-Y. A-T-T-Y is the abbreviation for the word attorney. And if you're ever thinking about trailers, you're thinking, oh, man, I wish I had more. I wish I had less. I wish I knew more about trailers. I buy them. I sell them. I lease them. I like to look at them and talk about them.
That's a hell of a way to end the show. Matthew, thank you.
Yay! We did it.